My name is Laird McNeil, and I'm a teamer this year with I Remember 2021. I have the pleasure to read for you all today words sent to us from Ernst Grube, President of the Lagergemeinschaft Dachau, for the opening of the International Youth Meeting 2021. Dear participants of the International Youth Meeting, I'm glad that this youth meeting is taking place despite the pandemic. Albeit digitally, this makes it possible for participants from far-flung countries to take part, such as Uganda, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Russia. Welcome to the International Youth Meeting. Almost 40 years ago, former prisoners of the Dachau concentration camp, mostly imprisoned for their resistance to the Nazi regime, advocated for these encounters. We wanted to pass on our experiences, and to do this in a meeting which, by its international character, was itself a piece of program. Namely, the coming together of young people from countries which had been attacked by German fascism and war, and whose population had suffered and still suffers from its crimes. Never again should nationalism and militarism, anti-Semitism and racism turn humans against each other and ultimately make them perpetrators of other people and peoples. Our goal is expressed with the quotation from the fifth leaflet of the student resistant group The White Rose from Munich. Quote, "Every people, every individual has a right to the goods of this earth," unquote. A statement which could not be more topical in the face of climate change and the exploitation of man and nature on an unprecedented scale, leading to currently more than 70 million people worldwide seeking refuge and being on the run. A statement that is very topical, especially during the pandemic. Why shouldn't the vaccine be produced and made available everywhere in the world as the minimum requirement for the human right of health? That means releasing the patents and the production at cost price. In the 1980s, these meetings took place as tent camps in a less secure framework. Therefore, we survivors, together with political friends, continued to fight to be able to establish these meetings as a permanent institution at a suitable location in Dachau. With the establishment of the first concentration camp in Dachau on March 20th, 1933, on the orders of the police chief Himmler, the extensive and systematic persecution of political opponents of the Nazi regime began. The most politically determined opponents of the Nazis came from the working class. They were communists, socialists, trade unionists, and critical intellectuals. They were imprisoned, tortured, and murdered, first as a deterrent for all of those who would not comply. The second commandant in Dachau concentration camp, Theodor Eicke, developed the concentration camp into a so-called school of violence for all other camps. In this way, the Nazi elites consolidated their rule and paved the way for the war of robbery and extermination and the Shoah. To quote Professor Wolfgang Benz and Barbara Distel, former director of the Dachau Memorial, here in Dachau, the SS men learned to, quote, regard people who thought differently as inferior and to murder them in cold blood. The translation of nationalist theories into bloody reality began in the Dachau concentration camp. Our effort was to make clear, based on our own sufferings and political experiences, what was and what must be prevented. Racism and anti-Semitism were and are made. They have a function for the economically and politically powerful. Images of the enemy were created. They distracted from the causes of crises and misery. They served to increase profits, to maintain privileges, and power that were deeply unjust. Images of the enemy and distorted images of reality created the conditions for the extensive militarization of society and for the preparation for war. Nazi propaganda served this purpose back then, and deliberate misleading, fake news, and disorientation serve it today. In addition, terror was and is used to eliminate critical voices, the opposition, and their organizations. We, who have survived fascism and war, have always been concerned with our reports not only to show the endpoints of fascist violence, as they are synonymous with Auschwitz, but also their starting points. We want to show the development to the full extent of the crimes of the Shoah and the war of extermination. How it came about, step by step through racist propaganda, disenfranchisement and exclusion, and militarization, that millions of Germans were made docile, obedient, drugged, and drunk on the poison of anti-Semitism, racism, and the ideology of national community, ready to carry out or tolerate these steps into crime. We need to be aware of this as a compass for our orientation and our actions. Let us take to heart what has been enshrined not only in Germany's basic law since liberation from fascism and war, but also in Article 1 of the Charter of Human Rights, and which applies everywhere on earth. Quote, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience, and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood." Unquote. Human rights apply to all people. Thank you.